Have you ever believed a blatant lie?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think we all have.
Right. But, I mean, not because it was, particularly convincing.
Right, like you didn't have any hard evidence for it.
Exactly. No hard evidence at all. You just believed it simply because, well, your absolute best friend in the world was the one who told it to you.
Yeah, that happens a lot, actually. And we usually feel pretty foolish afterward, right?
We do. We just sort of brush it off as this lapse in judgment. But what if I told you that according to some of the world's top philosophers, being slightly delusional about your friends isn't necessarily a cognitive flaw?
Wait, really?
Yeah, that it might actually be like a requirement for being a good person.
Oh, wow. That completely flips our whole understanding of rationality on its head.
It really does. And
Yeah.
that mind-bending tension, between seeking the cold, hard truth and navigating the incredibly messy reality of our social lives, that is exactly where we are heading today.
I'm so ready for this.
Welcome to this deep dive into a truly monumental piece of scholarship. We are looking at the Oxford Handbook of Social Epistemology, which was published in 2025 and edited by Jennifer Lackey and Aidan McGlynn.
It is a massive text.
It's huge. We have a giant stack of sources here drawn from this work. It covers, everything. The hidden rules of everyday gossip, the systemic prejudice that's just baked right into our institutions.
The algorithms feeding our news habits.
Yes, all of that. All the way to how a society can collectively decide to just completely forget its own history.
It's an incredibly ambitious project.
Yeah.
But I think to really grasp what this handbook is trying to do, we have to step back a second.
Yeah, let's set the stage.
We need to define what social epistemology actually is,
Right.
because it represents this massive shift in how we think about thinking.
Right. How did traditional philosophy handle this?
Well, for centuries, traditional philosophy essentially pictured knowledge as this strictly solo pursuit.
Like the lone thinker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of René Descartes meditating entirely alone by his fireplace, using pure, isolated reason to deduce the nature of reality.
Right. The ideal knower was just this lone genius in a vacuum.
Precisely. The lone detective working late in the lab, trusting absolutely no one.
Which makes for a great movie, but...
But this handbook explodes that idea entirely. It argues that our capacity as epistemic agents, which, by the way, is just the philosophical term for how we know things, is deeply and inextricably intertwined with other people.
Because we're social creatures.
Right. We are socially embedded creatures. So our knowledge is a socially embedded phenomenon. You don't just know things in a vacuum.
You know things because you were taught.
Because you listened, because you debated, and crucially, because you trusted.
I love that. We are not just, brains in a vat. We are people in a really messy, loud, complicated room trying to talk to each other.
That's a great way to picture it.
So our mission today for you, the listener, is to comprehensively unpack this scholarly work. We want to translate these dense, brilliant philosophical insights into practical aha moments.
Break it all down.
Exactly. We want to figure out how we as a society and as individuals acquire, share, and sometimes tragically fail to share knowledge.
It's a huge journey.
It is. We're going to travel through the mechanics of basic communication, explore the friction of our closest relationships, confront the dark side of systemic epistemic wrongs, apply all of this to modern tech and disability, and finally, look at how our very memories are constructed by the people around us.
It's going to be a lot, but it's fascinating.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the very foundation of how we share information. Because before we can talk about societies or algorithms, we have to look at the most basic building block of social knowledge.
Which is just a simple statement of fact.
Right.
In the literature, this is known as assertion. And the handbook opens with this really deep exploration of it by Christoph Kelp and Mona Simeon.
Because in casual conversation, we might just think of an assertion as saying a sentence out loud.
Right, just making noise. But philosophically, making an assertion is a highly specific, rule-governed action.
How so?
You are making a claim about the way the world is, and you have the explicit intent of sharing a truth. Kelp and Simeon argue that the core epistemic function of assertion, like its entire reason for existing as a human behavior, is specifically to generate knowledge in the hearer.
Oh, I love how this is framed. It turns speaking into this active transfer of responsibility.
Exactly.
To use an analogy, an assertion isn't just throwing a baseball against a brick wall to see if it bounces back.
Or just shouting into a canyon to hear the echo.
Right. It is a deliberate, highly coordinated pass in a relay race. And the baton that's being passed is not knowledge itself.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
If I assert something to you, like if I look you right in the eye and say, the train leaves at 4 riddle p.m., I'm essentially handing you the baton. I'm saying, run with this. It's solid. You can base your future actions on this.
And a lot of the early chapters in this handbook explore the exact conditions under which that baton pass is successful.
Because it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. For instance, Axel Gelford dives into the epistemology of testimony. Basically, once you hand me that baton, why should I take it?
Right. Why should I believe you?
And this brings up a massive historical debate in philosophy. It's between reductionism and anti-reductionism.
Okay, those are big terms. Break those down for me. How do they actually relate to trusting someone's word?
Okay, so let's say you tell me it's raining outside.
Okay.
The reductionist argues that I only have a good reason to believe you if I can reduce my trust to my own past experiences.
What does that mean in practice?
It means I have to have empirically observed in the past that people, generally, tell the truth about the weather, and I also have to have observed that you, specifically, are a reliable person.
Got it. So my trust in your testimony is built entirely on a foundation of my own independent evidence. I've run the background check in my head and you passed.
Exactly. But the anti-reductionist argues something much more radical.
Okay, what do they say?
They argue that testimony is a fundamental bedrock source of knowledge, just like memory or perception.
Really? Like, I don't need the background check.
Right. You don't need a past track record to justify trusting someone, as long as there's no obvious reason to doubt them. You have a fundamental, non-reducible right to trust testimony by default.
Oh, wow. Which connects directly to Peter J. Graham's work in the text, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because he defends this epistemic analogy between testimony and perception. He's essentially asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I see a tree out the window, I just generally trust my eyes, right? I'm not running a complex philosophical proof about optics in my head.
No, you just accept it.
Right. So if you walk into the room and tell me there's a tree outside, Graham is asking, shouldn't I trust your words with the same automatic baseline confidence that I trust my own vision?
Exactly. Graham argues that we should. It's a foundational way we interact with the world.
But of course, the baton pass gets infinitely more complicated when the information isn't just about trees or the weather.
Oh, absolutely. Christoph Jaeger and Thomas Grunman explore what happens when we bring epistemic authority into the mix.
Meaning experts.
Right. What happens when the person passing the baton isn't just a peer, but an expert? Grundman raises a highly practical question for our modern world.
Which is?
How can lay people, who by definition lack the expertise in a given field, actually identify who the real experts are?
Oh, this is the ultimate modern dilemma. I mean, I don't know the first thing about virology.
Or aerodynamics or structural engineering?
Exactly. I have absolutely no choice but to trust the experts if I want to, get medicine, board an airplane, or drive over a suspension bridge.
You have to defer to them.
I do. I have to let their expert belief preempt my own uneducated guesses. But, and here's the trick, I still need the autonomy to figure out who is wearing the real lab coat and who is just a guy on the internet selling snake oil.
It's a state of profound vulnerability. It's a state of deep epistemic dependence.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. Vulnerable.
And because we are so dependent, the track that this entire relay race is run on is trust. J. Adam Carter has a brilliant section on this.
What does he argue?
He argues that trust is the absolute critical ingredient for successful communication and the transmission of knowledge. It doesn't work without it.
Okay, but wait, I have to push back here a little bit.
Sure.
Trusting a stranger, or even an expert, feels inherently risky. If anti-reductionists say we should just trust by default, how do we balance this necessary, beautiful function of sharing knowledge with the very real, very dangerous possibility of just being incredibly gullible? It's a tightrope walk. It is. I mean, people lie. People are wrong. If I just take every baton handed to me, I'm going to run right off a cliff.
This raises a crucial point, and it's exactly where Carter's analysis really shines. Trust isn't just a binary switch.
Like, it's not just on or off.
Right. The philosophers here are debating the exact conditions under which trusting a speaker actually generates real knowledge versus just, generating a lucky guess or a false belief. Carter navigates the theoretical space between trust, trustworthiness, and distrust.
How does he separate those? Because they sound kind of similar.
Well, trust isn't just about predicting someone's behavior.
Okay.
Like, I can predict that a broken clock will show the right time twice a day, but I don't trust the clock.
Right, that makes sense.
Trust involves a normative expectation. I expect you to be truthful because of some social or moral commitment between us. And crucially, Carter points out that distrust isn't just the absence of trust.
Wait, really? What's the difference between not trusting someone and actively distrusting them?
Think about a complete stranger you pass on the street.
Okay.
You don't actively trust them with your life savings, right?
Definitely not.
But you don't actively distrust them either. You are in a state of non-trust.
Oh, I see.
Distrust, on the other hand, is a distinct, active epistemic stance. It is a positive belief that the person is likely to be incompetent, negligent, or malicious.
Wow, okay.
To survive as knowers in a society, we can't just be blindly trusting or universally paranoid. We have to constantly calibrate our instruments, reading social cues, assessing trustworthiness, and actively deploying distrust when the environment demands it.
Okay, so it's like tuning an instrument in real time. You're constantly adjusting the dials based on the feedback you're getting from the person in front of you.
Exactly.
But here's where my mind starts to spin a bit. We've been talking about this calibration happening between two individuals, right? You and me, speaker and hearer.
Right.
But society isn't just pairs of people. We operate in groups. What happens when the knower isn't a person, but a massive collective?
This is one of the most fascinating leaps in social epistemology, honestly. Fernando Brancano-Baracol maps out this exact terrain when he talks about pluralistic summativism regarding group belief.
Pluralistic summativism. Okay, what's the core question there?
The fundamental question is, does a group, like a jury, a corporation, or a government, actually hold a belief? And if so, is that group's belief just a simple mathematical sum of the individuals inside it, or is it something entirely distinct?
This is wild. Give me a concrete scenario of how a group belief could be different from the beliefs of the people in the group.
Let's look at a corporate board of directors facing a crisis.
Okay, classic scenario.
Say there's been a minor chemical spill at one of their factories. Brancano-Baracol outlines classical summativism, which would say the corporation's belief is just a tally of the individual board members.
So if 3 out of 5 members secretly believe the spill is completely harmless, then the group believes it is harmless.
Right. That makes intuitive sense, right? You just take a vote.
Yeah, simple math.
But then he introduces non-summative views, like the joint acceptance account.
Okay, how does that change things?
Let's say those same 5 board members meet with their legal team. The lawyers say, look, if we publicly claim this is harmless and we're wrong, we will be sued into oblivion. We must formally operate as if this spill is dangerous.
Ah, liability.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the board votes unanimously to release a public statement and internal policy stating the company recognizes the severe danger of this spill.
Oh, wow. So as an entity, the corporation believes it is dangerous. It acts on that belief, spends money based on that belief, creates policies based on that belief.
Yes.
Even if, in their own private heads, the majority of the board thinks it's totally safe.
Exactly. The group has formally accepted a premise. That corporate statement operates as an epistemic reality in the world. The corporation has a belief that is entirely distinct from the sum of the private beliefs of its members.
The group takes on an epistemic life of its own.
It really does.
That perfectly transitions us to the next massive theme in our deep dive. We just established how trust, assertion, and group belief work in these sort of formal, mechanical ways.
Right.
But human beings aren't just logical machines running trust algorithms. We have emotional lives.
Very messy emotional lives.
So what happens to all these clean epistemic rules when we apply them to our closest, messiest relationships? Let's talk about the friction of friendship.
Yes, there is an incredibly provocative argument here by Anna Brinkerhoff and Nomi Arpele on epistemic partiality in friendship.
I am so intrigued by this.
They are exploring a view that makes a lot of traditional philosophers very uncomfortable.
Why? What do they argue?
They argue that what you ought to believe isn't just determined by objective evidence. It is actually determined in part by your friendships.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You touched on this right at the start. Are these scholars actually giving us permission to be completely delusional about our best friends?
Well,
Because, isn't the whole point of epistemology to find the cold, hard, objective truth? Let's say my best friend is constantly late, always flakes on plans, and borrows money without paying it back.
not a great track record.
Terrible track record. But because we're besties, I choose to believe they are a highly reliable, upstanding person. I'm just wrong, right? I'm actively ignoring the data.
What's fascinating here is exactly that tension between the data and the relationship. Brinkerhoff and Arpele are directly challenging one of the most deeply held dogmas of traditional philosophy, which is evidentialism.
Evidentialism. What's the strict definition of that?
It's the strict rule that your beliefs should be based only on truth-related considerations and hard evidence. If the data says your friend is flaky, you must believe they are flaky. End of story.
Right. That just sounds like basic rationality.
But they suggest that our social bonds have their own valid epistemic gravity.
Give me a scenario.
Okay, think about this. Imagine an acquaintance at a party tells you a really nasty rumor about a stranger.
Okay.
You might believe it pretty easily based on that flimsy testimony, right? People gossip all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Now, imagine they tell you the exact same nasty rumor with the exact same level of flimsy evidence, but it's about your absolute best friend. If you instantly believe that rumor, using the exact same standard of evidence you use for the stranger, are you really being a good friend?
Oh, wow. No, I'd be a terrible friend.
Right.
My loyalty demands that I give my friend the benefit of the doubt. I would demand a much, much higher threshold of proof before I believe something awful about them.
Precisely. And what this chapter suggests is that the norms of friendship interlock with the norms of belief. Your loyalty isn't just an emotional quirk that clouds your judgment.
Right.
It actually alters the epistemic requirements for belief. You have an epistemic duty to be partial to your friend.
So it's not just blind faith.
No, it's not permission to be completely delusional in the face of absolute proof, but it is a recognition that the social context deeply changes how heavy the evidence needs to be before it moves the needle of your belief.
That is mind-bending. It means being a good knower, someone who accurately maps reality, and being a good friend can actually pull you in completely opposite direction.
They absolutely can.
It introduces this whole moral dimension to how we process data. But of course, as the text explores, these interpersonal dynamics aren't always about the warm, protective glow of friendship.
Definitely not.
Sometimes the way groups bond and share information leads them to get things systematically dangerously wrong.
Indeed. While groups can pool information to achieve incredible feats of knowledge, like, putting a rover on Mars, they can also pool their biases and blind spots to construct profound, durable ignorance.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Rick Peels and Thurza Lodgewood explore this in their work on group ignorance, specifically highlighting the concept of white ignorance.
I really want to spend some time here, because when we hear the word ignorance, we usually think of a passive lack of information.
Right.
Like, I am ignorant of quantum physics because I just never sat down and read a book about it. It's an accidental gap in my data.
Right. That's the traditional view of ignorance. But white ignorance, which is a concept originally pioneered by the philosopher Charles Mills and deeply analyzed in this text, is fundamentally different. It is a form of structural, group-based not knowing that is active.
Active ignorance.
Yes. It is an ignorance that is actively produced, structurally supported, and fiercely maintained by a dominant group in order to preserve a specific social order and protect their own privilege.
So how does a group actively manufacture ignorance? That sounds like a massive conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy in the sense of a smoky back room. It happens through a million interconnected social mechanisms.
Like what?
It happens through the sanitization of history textbooks, removing the brutal realities of colonialism or slavery so that the dominant group doesn't have to feel guilt or question their current status.
Right, shaping the narrative from childhood.
Exactly. It happens through segregated housing and schooling, which structurally prevents the dominant group from having to witness the lived reality of marginalized groups.
So if you don't see it, you don't have to know about it.
Precisely. And it happens through media representation that frames systemic inequality as just a series of individual moral failings. This ignorance isn't a mistake. It's a substantive, motivated refusal to see reality.
Because seeing reality would require giving up power.
Exactly.
It's like a collective psychological defense mechanism that has just been completely institutionalized.
It really is.
And the handbook doesn't shy away from other ways our social structures weaponize knowledge against the truth. We see this in the sections on adversarial epistemology, focusing on deception and lying.
Right. Don Fallis writes about that.
And Thomas Kelly's work on bias and disagreement, which looks at how dogmatism and belief polarization take root in communities.
It paints a very sobering picture of how we interact. The exact same social connections that are absolutely necessary for us to know anything.
Right.
The trust, the baton passing, the group cohesion are the exact same mechanisms that can be hijacked to spread lies, enforce ignorance, and tear us apart.
And that sobering reality leads us logically into what I found to be perhaps the most urgent, ethically charged section of the entire deep dive.
It's a heavy section.
It is. Building directly on the idea that social dynamics can fail us, we have to look at what happens when these failures become systemic harms. What happens when people are wronged, not just physically or economically, but specifically wronged in their capacity as knowers.
This is a critical evolution in modern philosophy. Aidan McGlynn, one of the editors of the Handbook, provides this deep, comprehensive overview of epistemic injustice.
And he draws a lot from Miranda Fricker, right?
Heavily. He heavily references the canonical work of Miranda Fricker, who essentially coined this terminology. She gave philosophers the vocabulary to talk about these specific harms.
Which is so important.
It is. There are two main concepts here that we really need to break down in detail: testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice.
Okay, let's start with testimonial injustice. How does Fricker define it?
Testimonial injustice occurs when a speaker receives a deflated level of credibility from a hearer due to an identity prejudice on the hearer's part.
Okay, let's unpack that with some concrete scenarios so the impact is really clear for you listening.
Okay. Imagine a speaker who is telling the absolute truth, and they have the evidence to back it up. They are holding a solid baton, ready to pass it.
Right.
But the listener, either consciously or unconsciously, looks at the speaker's race or their gender or their regional accent or their economic class and instantly downgrades their credibility.
So the baton is rejected?
Yes. Not because it's fake, but because of the color of the hand holding it or the gender of the person holding it.
Think about the everyday devastation of this. Just think of a woman in a high-stakes corporate meeting who points out a fatal flaw in a financial plan.
Oh, this happens all the time.
She is ignored, maybe talked over, her concern brushed aside as being overly anxious. 10 minutes later, a male colleague makes the exact same structural point about the financials, and suddenly he is praised for his sharp, objective insight.
It's a classic example.
Or look at an even more life and death scenario. A Black patient in an emergency room accurately describing their severe pain levels to a doctor.
Right.
And the doctor, influenced by deep-seated, documented racial biases in the medical field regarding pain tolerance, assumes the patient is exaggerating and refuses to administer necessary pain medication.
Both are textbook examples of testimonial injustice. The speaker is actively trying to share knowledge, but their testimony is quieted and marginalized by prejudice.
It's just devastating.
They are having their fundamental human capacity to participate in the exchange of truth stripped away from them. It is an insult to their very humanity as a rational agent.
It's infuriating. And Fricker's second concept, hermeneutical injustice, is arguably even more insidious.
It is.
Because it operates on a level deeper than just not being believed. It's about not even having the words to be believed in the first place.
Yes. Hermeneutics is the study of interpretation and meaning. So hermeneutical injustice occurs when a society fundamentally lacks the shared conceptual tools or the vocabulary for marginalized people to even make sense of their own lived experiences, let alone communicate them to others.
The classic historical example of this, which I know is discussed in these philosophical circles constantly, is the concept of sexual harassment before the term sexual harassment was actually invented and widely adopted in the 1970s.
It's the perfect illustration of this concept. Before that term existed in the collected dictionary, women were experiencing this profound structural harm in the workplace. They were being coerced, marginalized, and abused.
Right.
But because the broader society, which was of course dominated by men, had no interest in defining that harm, they never generated the shared epistemic resources to identify it.
So a woman experiencing this might just think, I guess this is just what working is like.
Or she might be told, boys will be boys.
Or she might just think she was personally failing to handle the pressure.
Exactly. You literally don't have the words to describe your own suffering because the society that creates the dictionary doesn't care about your suffering. You're trapped in an epistemic void.
It's chilling. It really is. And this section of the handbook explores so many other variations of these structural harms. Lauren Layden Hardy writes about epistemic infringement.
Yes, focusing on how predators use grooming and gaslighting to dismantle a victim's trust in their own mind.
And Catherine Puttyfoot takes a hard look at implicit bias, how our brains use stereotypes as cognitive shortcuts that end up profoundly deceiving us.
Which is something we all have to be aware of.
But the chapter that absolutely stopped me in my tracks was Carrie Figdor's work on doxastic addiction.
That is a deeply fascinating cutting-edge concept.
Doxastic simply refers to belief, right?
Right. Figdor is exploring what happens when people become completely unable to stop trusting a source, despite overwhelming, massive, undeniable evidence that the source is untrustworthy.
We see this everywhere today. I mean, why do people stay glued to a charismatic cult leader or a deeply partisan news channel or a conspiracy theory forum, even when the claims are proven false over and over and over again.
It's baffling from the outside.
We usually just assume these people are stupid or they have some massive character flaw.
But Figdor argues that it's a mistake to view this purely as a failure of logic. She actually imports the clinical framework of addiction from psychology and neurobiology and applies it to belief and trust.
So treating belief like a substance.
Yes.
Hmm.
She argues that trusting these sources can trigger the exact same reward pathways in the brain as a chemical substance.
Wow.
Believing the conspiracy theory or trusting the cult leader provides a hit of dopamine. It gives a sense of belonging, a feeling of absolute certainty in a chaotic world.
So when a fact checker comes along and shows them a chart proving the cult leader lied, it's completely useless.
Completely.
It's like trying to cure someone's substance addiction by showing them a chart about liver damage. You aren't addressing the mechanism of the dependency.
Exactly. The person isn't just making a mistake in reasoning. They are trapped in the compulsive mechanics of an addiction. Their brain is demanding the hit of certainty that the false source provides.
It completely changes how we have to approach the problem of misinformation, doesn't it?
It really has. If we are dealing with doxastic addiction, then pure cold logic isn't the cure. We have to look at the emotional and social dependencies that are driving the belief.
So what does this all mean for us? If the damage is this deep and structural, if we have systemic racism discounting testimony in hospitals, implicit biases warping our everyday perception, societies missing the vocabulary to describe their own pain, and people literally addicted to false sources, how do we even begin to fix it? Is the whole epistemic system just irreparably broken?
It's a very daunting landscape.
Yeah.
But that is the exact question Jennifer Lackey tackles in her chapter, The Case for Epistemic Reparations.
Okay, this is a very powerful pivot in the text.
It is. Lackey argues that if we recognize these as distinctively epistemic wrongs, harms done to people specifically in their capacity as knowers, separate from the economic or physical harms, then we have a moral obligation to figure out what we owe to the victims.
But what do epistemic reparations actually look like in practice? We can't just hand someone a check and say, sorry, we didn't believe you.
No, it requires structural repair. Epistemic reparations might look like radically changing how we gather and weigh evidence in the criminal justice system to counteract racial bias.
Okay, making institutional changes.
Right. It might look like changing how we fund scientific and historical research, ensuring that marginalized communities are leading the inquiry into their own histories.
Putting them in charge of the knowledge production.
Yes. It means actively elevating voices in public discourse that have historically been subjected to testimonial quieting. It is about actively restoring the epistemic agency that was stolen from them.
It's about rebuilding the track, clearing the hurdles, and ensuring everyone can actually run the relay race fairly.
That's a great metaphor.
And having mapped out this intense theory of epistemic wrongs and reparations, the handbook does something really satisfying. It shifts into applied social epistemology.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. It takes this theoretical lens and focuses it on specific, highly relevant domains of our modern life.
We move from abstract theory directly to the screens in our pockets. There's a deep dive here by Michael P. Lynch and Jeannie L. Kim on the epistemic harms of information personalization.
Okay, looking at how the internet, and specifically algorithmic feeds, tailor information specifically to our existing biases and preferences.
We all know the feeling of the algorithm feeding us exactly what we want to hear. But what is the specific epistemic harm they identify?
Right, because it just feels like getting good recommendations.
But they argue that personalization doesn't just create echo chambers. It fundamentally alters our shared reality.
How so?
When two people can search for the exact same current event and receive entirely different sets of facts based on their digital profile, it destroys the common ground necessary for societal debate.
We aren't even looking at the same map anymore.
Exactly. It generates new, hyper-modern forms of skepticism where we can't even agree on the basic baseline of reality. Joshua Habgood-Koot follows this up with a critical, in-depth look directly at the structure of social media platforms and how their design incentivizes outrage over accuracy.
And it is absolutely vital to pause here and note how the handbook handles highly charged, controversial topics.
Yes, we need to be clear here.
We have sections by Michael Hannon and Elizabeth Edenberg on political epistemology, and David Cody analyzing the epistemology of the public debate about anthropogenic climate change.
And we must be perfectly clear to everyone listening. We are reporting on the structural analysis provided in these academic sources. We are not taking sides, and the text itself is not endorsing underlying political ideologies.
Right, none of this is about telling you what political side is right or wrong.
The philosophers in this handbook are analyzing the epistemological structures of these debates.
They are asking structural questions, like how is information framed by different political camps? How is trust distributed and weaponized among partisans?
Right.
When a society faces a complex scientific issue like climate change, how does it adjudicate between competing claims of scientific consensus versus deeply funded skepticism? It's an investigation into the machinery of public debate, regardless of whether you lean left or right.
Exactly.
It's looking at how the engine of the debate operates, how the fuel of information is injected, and where the exhaust goes.
That's a great way to put it. But I want to highlight another application in this section that is profoundly important. Joel Michael Reynolds and Kevin Timpai write on disability and social epistemology.
This section absolutely blew my mind.
It's powerful.
Because it takes the concept of epistemic injustice we talked about earlier, and it applies it in a way that I think a lot of people, myself included, rarely consider.
It is a profound application. They explore how ableism directly impacts a person's perceived capacity to know. They point out that society often rigidly equates neurotypical cognitive function, the way a standard brain processes and communicates, with the only valid way of processing and communicating knowledge.
Which is incredibly limiting.
It is. When individuals who don't fit that mold, such as those on the autism spectrum, those with cerebral palsy, or those with intellectual disabilities interact with the world, their testimony is often preemptively dismissed.
So the baton they're trying to pass is rejected simply because it doesn't arrive in the expected neurotypical package.
Exactly.
To try and capture the friction of this translation, let's use an analogy.
I love your analogies. Go for it.
Imagine that neurotypical communicative norms, the unwritten rules of eye contact, tone of voice, pacing, body language, are like a specific exclusive radio frequency. Let's call it 101.5 FM.
Okay, 101.5 FM.
Society builds its institutions, its schools, its courtrooms entirely to broadcast and receive on 101.5 FM. Now, imagine someone is autistic. They might be broadcasting a crystal clear, incredibly insightful, vital signal, but they are broadcasting it on 98.2 FM.
I see where this is going.
Because society stubbornly refuses to turn the dial, refusing to accommodate a different style of communication, it unjustly assumes the person on 98.2 has absolutely nothing valuable to say, or worse, assumes they lack the capacity to know anything at all.
That analogy captures the harm perfectly. It is a profound epistemic injustice disguised as a communication barrier. The failure isn't in the broadcaster on 98.2 FM.
No, not at all.
The failure is the receiver's stubbornness. We blame the marginalized person for our own refusal to turn the dial.
We disable them epistemically.
Exactly. Timpai and Reynolds highlight that the capacity to know is often a deeply collaborative act. Meaning is made together.
Right.
If the dominant social environment refuses to collaborate, refuses to reach across that communicative gap, it artificially disables the individual's epistemic agency. It forces us to radically broaden our definition of what it means to be a knower and what a valid communicative exchange looks like.
It really makes you evaluate every single interaction you have.
Yeah.
It forces you to ask, am I rejecting this information because it's wrong or just because I don't like the frequency it's being broadcast on?
It's a necessary self-reflection.
It really is. Now, as we near the final stretch of this massive text, the discussion pans out even further. We move into the later sections of the handbook, looking at epistemic goods, the nature of memory, and finally, a radical rethink of individualist philosophy itself.
Let's touch briefly on the exploration of social epistemic goods. We have scholars like Brianna Toole discussing standpoint epistemology.
Which is becoming a very influential idea, right?
It is. It argues that social, political, and economic disadvantages can actually create profound epistemic advantages.
Okay, explain how a disadvantage makes you a better knower. Because that sounds counterintuitive.
The theory is that if you are marginalized by a system, you are forced to understand how that system works in order to survive it.
Ah, I see.
A person experiencing poverty understands the brutal realities of the economic system far better than a billionaire who is completely insulated from its consequences. Marginalization provides a clearer, less mythologized vantage point on reality.
Because you can't afford the myths.
Exactly. The text also features Yuri Kath looking at the difference between knowing how to do something versus knowing that a fact is true, and Alan Hazlitt talking about how we transmit deep understanding as opposed to just memorizing raw facts.
But the idea that I found absolutely mesmerizing in this later half comes from Alessandra Tannasini. She writes about the social epistemology of scaffolded and collective memory and forgetting.
Yes, this is a mind-bending chapter.
So what does this all mean? When I think of forgetting, I think of an accidental loss of data, like a hard drive failing or my brain just misplacing where I put my keys.
Right, a cognitive glitch.
But is she arguing that forgetting is an active, socially constructed choice?
She is. And to understand why, we have to look at the concept of cognitive niches and extended cognition. Tannasini points out that human beings do not just store memories inside the meat of our skulls. That would be incredibly inefficient.
Right.
Instead, we rely heavily on external scaffolding to remember for us.
Give me an example of scaffolding.
A diary is scaffolding. A smartphone calendar is scaffolding. A search engine. A monument in a town square. A museum. And most importantly, other people in our community.
Oh, like couples.
Yes, couples often divide memory labor. One remembers the birthdays, the other remembers the finances. Our cognition, our very ability to remember the past is distributed out into the world.
So my memory lives in my environment just as much as it lives in my neurons.
Exactly. And here's where it gets dark. Because memory is distributed in the social and physical environment, forgetting can be socially engineered.
Wait, how?
Tannasini unpacked the terrifying idea of collective amnesia. This is where societies collectively decide to deny or erase unsavory, brutal aspects of their historical past.
How do they execute that? How does a whole society just forget?
By actively dismantling the scaffolding.
Oh, wow.
If a culture wants to forget a shameful war or an era of oppression, they tear down the statues. They rewrite the history textbooks to soften the language. They enforce strict social taboos, making it impolite or dangerous to talk about certain events in public.
They just erase the triggers.
Exactly. By removing the external triggers, the society actively dismantles the cognitive environment required to remember. The older generation dies off, the scaffolding is gone, and the new generation literally has no way to remember.
That is wild.
Forgetting becomes a deliberate, structural epistemic strategy used by a culture to protect its self-image and avoid accountability.
We outsource our memory to the culture, and the culture can decide to reformat the hard drive to protect its ego. That is so profound.
It really is.
And this idea of our minds extending out into the social world, it doesn't just apply to memory, does it? Katerina de Tulnoves argues it applies to how we reason.
Yes, she writes on the social epistemology of reasoning and argumentation. Traditionally, we think of reasoning as a solitary logic puzzle you do in your head, like a math problem.
Right, sitting alone at a desk.
But she argues that human reasoning is inherently a social competence. It evolved based on interaction and coordination. Drawing on evolutionary and social exchange theory, she posits that we didn't develop the capacity to reason just to sit on a mountain and deduce abstract truths.
What did we develop it for?
We developed it to justify our actions to our tribe, to coordinate group behavior, and to persuade others not to kill us.
So reasoning is a social tool, not just a truth-finding tool.
Exactly. Reasoning is fundamentally a dialogue. Even when you were sitting completely alone in your room, weighing the pros and cons of a decision, you were actually anticipating the objections of an imagined conversational partner.
Your brain is running a simulation of a social debate.
Yes.
Which brings us to the grand finale. The handbook concludes by looking at all of this, the assertion, the trust, the injustice, the extended memory, the social reasoning, and asks a really existential question for the entire field of philosophy.
Right.
We have heavyweight scholars like Duncan Pritchard, Sanford C. Goldberg, and John Greco asking, where do we go from here?
The question they are grappling with is whether the social turn in epistemology is just a nice little supplement to traditional individualistic philosophy.
Like, is it just an add-on?
Yeah, is it like just adding a sunroof to a car, keeping the same engine? Or does recognizing all this require a radical, ground-up rethinking of the whole field?
And what's the verdict?
If memory, reasoning, justification, and even our basic perception are fundamentally dependent on other people in our social environment, then the traditional model of the lone individual as the primary unit of knowledge is totally inadequate.
So we can't just keep the old model.
No, we can't just tack the word social onto the front of epistemology and call it a day. The social element isn't the decoration. It is the foundation. These concluding chapters suggest we need a massive revisionary approach to how we understand human intelligence.
That is a tectonic shift. It really changes how you view yourself as a thinking creature.
It really does.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's do a comprehensive summary of this deep dive.
Good idea.
The Oxford Handbook of Social Epistemology took us on an incredible journey. We started with the basic, microscopic mechanics of a single assertion, the passing of the knowledge baton, and saw how trust provides the vital track we run on.
We move through the messy, biased friction of friendship where loyalty can actually warp the gravity of objective evidence.
And we explored the terrifying reality of group ignorance, where communities actively pool their blind spots to preserve power.
We then confronted the deep, systemic dangers of epistemic injustice, how identity prejudice leads to testimonial quieting, and how a lack of shared vocabulary creates hermeneutical marginalization, trapping victims in silence.
We looked at how these ancient social flaws map onto our modern digital algorithms and the ableism baked into our communicative norms.
And finally, we arrived at the staggering realization that our most intimate cognitive functions, like memory and reasoning, aren't locked inside our skulls.
No, they are fundamentally collective, built on the scaffolding of the society around us. It is a dizzying, brilliant text that forces you to reevaluate every thought you have, every newsfeed you scroll, and every conversation you engage in.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate takeaway is this. Knowledge is not a solitary possession you keep locked in a vault inside your head. It is an active communal currency.
I like that.
It only has value when it is shared. And like any currency, its value depends entirely on the health, fairness, and trust of the network in which it circulates. We don't just have a duty to be smart, we have an ethical obligation to circulate that currency justly and to build networks where everyone's testimony is valued.
I absolutely love that. And to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day, if everything from our memory to our reasoning is scaffolded by the people and the society around us, is the idea of the lone objective genius actually an epistemic myth? And does clinging to the myth of the solitary genius prevent us from seeking true communal understanding? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep turning the dial to listen to new frequencies and keep questioning where your knowledge truly comes from.